Alright guys, today we're going to be doing section 7.1 and 7.2. We're going to learn about decimals and do several different skills with them. So the first thing we're going to do is fill out this decimal place value chart. So you've seen a regular place value chart with whole numbers, but let's talk about what happens when there's a decimal here. So before the decimal, this is what we call the ones place. And the one before the ones, if we're going to the left, is tens. And of course we know this continues on to the left, but that's all we're going to need for today. So tens, ones, and then we get to the decimal point. So remember that a decimal is just another way to represent a fraction, which is part of a whole number. So a decimal is a way to represent the parts of a number when we don't have the whole number there. So the first place after the decimal we call the tenths place. THS at the end. The second place after the decimal is called the hundredths place. And try to squeeze that in. Spell the word hundred and then THS. Tenths, hundredths, and then the third place after the decimal we call the thousandths place. And of course, just like to the left, the place values to the right continue on, but those are the most common three you're going to see and the ones we're going to work with today. So after the decimal, we have tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Okay? The first skill we're going to do is we're going to be given a decimal and write each decimal in words. So if we were to read this out loud, like in real life, we would say 2.95. But in decimal words, what we're going to do when we get to the decimal is we're going to say the word and. So you can go ahead and write that under the decimal up there. So think about just like money. If that was money, we would say $2.95, right? But instead of being dollars and cents, 2 is our whole number. So we're going to write this as 2. We got to the decimal, 2, and we're going to go ahead and write 95. But 95 what? And the last word will be the last place value that we have a number in. So the 5 is in the hundredths place, so we call this 95 hundredths. So this is read as 2 and 95 hundredths. Let's look at number 2. We have the whole number 15. 15, we got to the decimal, and the number 3. 3 what? What place is the 3 in? It's in the tenths place. So we read this as 15 and 3 tenths. Okay. On number 3, we have a 3 in the ones place. So 3 and what? 3 and, read the number as normal, as you normally would. 621 what? The 1 is in the thousandths place. So we read this as 3 and 621 thousandths. Squeeze that in. 3 and 621 thousandths. Now what about number 4? There's not a whole number. There's a 0 there. So we could say 0 and something, but we don't really need to do that. So all we see after the decimal is the number 8. But there's only one 8, but we have to be careful and pay attention to what place it's in. The 8 is in the hundredths place. So this isn't 8 tenths, it's actually 8 hundredths because it ends in the hundredths place. So again, you could write 0 and 8 hundredths. But it's kind of like if you just have 8 pennies, you're not going to say, I have $0 and 8 pennies. You would just say 8 pennies. So we really don't need that. Okay, the next objective we have is we're basically going to do the opposite. This time we're given the words and we're going to write it in standard form, which just means number form. So what it would look like as a number with digits. So again, we're going to read it, but be careful with the place values of the digits. So this one says 13 and 5 thousandths. So anything before the and, I like to put a box around it sometimes. Anything before that is my whole number, 13. The and word signals my decimal, 13 and 5 thousandths. So be careful because some people might just put a 5 here after the decimal. That would be 13 and 5 tenths. we want it to end in the thousandths place. So the 5 needs to be in the thousandths place. And what we're going to do is put zeros in the tenths and hundredths place. So to clean that up, it's going to be 13.005, 13 and 5 thousandths. On number 6, we have 6 and 7 hundredths. 6 and 7 hundredths. So the 7 needs to be in the hundredths place, which is right here. So again, we're going to put a 0 here. So make sure you know that 6.07 is not the same thing as if you just wrote 6.7, because that would be 6 and 7 tenths, two completely different numbers. Number 7, 3 and 19 thousandths. So 3 is my whole number, and is the decimal, 19 thousandths, so I need the 19 to end in the thousandths place, or the last digit to be in the thousandths place. 3.019. What about 2 tenths? So this one we don't see the word and. So kind of like on number 4 up here, we don't have a whole number, and that's going to happen sometimes. So we can put 0. Tenths is the first place after the decimal. So if we just have 2 tenths, 0.2. Okay. Next, we're going to be given a decimal, and we're going to write it as a fraction or mixed number, but of course we always have to make sure our answer is in simplest form. So it's going to be very helpful just to read these out loud with decimal words, because that's going to help us know what fraction to write. Because if I just said 0.6, that doesn't really help me know what to do, but if I read this as 6 tenths, the fraction is going to be written just like it sounds. 6 tenths. Okay, 6 over 10. And so that is the correct answer, but of course we need to simplify. These both can be divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 6 tenths as a fraction in simplest form is 3/5. On number 10, we're going to read this as 35. What place is that in? That's hundredths. 35 hundredths. I'm going to come over here for space. So I'm going to write that first the way it sounds. 35 hundredths is 35 over 100. And I know those can be divided by 5 because they both end in 0 or 5. So 35 divided by 5 is 7. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So number 10, if you want to squeeze this down here next to it so you know that's the final answer, that's 7/20. Number 11, we would read that as 94 what? That's 94 thousandths because it ends in the thousandths place. So 94 over 1,000, which is the correct answer, but again, it's not in simplest form. I at least know they can be divided by 2 because they're both even. There's probably something bigger, but I can't think of that at the moment. 1,000 divided by 2 is 500, and what is 94 divided by 2? I'm going to pull up my calculator really quick to make it fast. 47. 47 over 500. 47 is a prime number, which means it can only be divided by 1 or 47, so we know that's as far as we can go for that one. Okay, last one. Notice all the first 3, we had zeros in all the whole number spots, but on number 12, we have a whole number of 2. So we would read this as 2 and 75 hundredths. So this one's actually going to be a mixed number. 2 is our whole number. It's our big number out front. 2 and 75 hundredths. But we can simplify that. So the 2 stays 2, but 75 hundredths simplifies to 3/4. 75 out of 100 is the same as if you have 3 quarters, so 2 and 3/4. Okay, we're going to move on to the next page. Number 13. This time we're going to compare decimals using greater than, less than, or equal to. Okay, so we're going to look at number 13. Compare, let me just get that down, sorry. Compare 0.096 or 96 thousandths to 34 hundredths. Now at first glance you may think 96 is the bigger one because you see 96 compared to 34. But what's really helpful is if you come over here and if you line up all of the place values, and what we can do in the empty spot is put a 0. Okay, so now notice that 34 hundredths has a 3 in the tenth spot, and this one has a 0 here, so this one's actually a greater value. Think about it this way, if you think about money. This is like 34 cents, and this is like 9 cents and a little bit more. So actually, 96 thousandths is less than 34 hundredths, so we would write it like that. On number 14, we have 15 hundredths compared to 143 thousandths. And kind of the same thing here. Sometimes people think since this has 3 digits that it's the bigger number. But when we stop and compare the place values, they both have a 1 here in the tenth spot, but in the hundredth spot, the 5 is bigger than the 4. And again, if I put a 0 here, that's like comparing 150 to 143. Which one's bigger? 150 is bigger. Therefore, 15 hundredths is bigger than or greater than 143 thousandths. Okay, what about on 15? We have 0.4, or 4 tenths I should say, and 40 hundredths. Again, at first glance, you may think that this one's bigger because it has a 40, but remember, if we stack and line them up, I can put a 0 in the empty spot, and what do we see? They're actually the exact same amount. They are equivalent. So think about it this way. 0.4 is like if you have 4 dimes, which is 40 cents, right? Or 40 hundredths is like if you have 40 pennies. Well, 4 dimes is the same thing as 40 pennies, right? It's just 2 different ways to write it. But again, when we compare the place values, they have the exact same digits in the same places. All right, on the last one, 6,401 thousandths, 10 thousandths actually, and 6,410 10 thousandths. 10 thousandths is after the thousandths place. So even though these are different, it can trick your brain a little bit because they have the same digits. So just to be safe, I still come over and line them up. 0.6410, and then I compare the place values. So they both have a 6 here, they both have a 4 here. This is where they are different. Which one's bigger, 0 or 1? 1 is, therefore, we're going to put that sign. The first one is less than. Okay, so we've compared decimals. Now we're going to do some rounding. We're going to round decimals given to the given place values. Okay, so either to the tenths, hundredths, thousandths, or whole number. Now the thing with rounding is, I'm sure you're familiar with it, we're going to look at a certain digit and it's going to tell us what to do. Okay, if the digit we're looking for is 5 or more, we raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. So I'll write that down for you. 5 or more, raise, I don't have enough room, I'll put raise score. That means go up 1. If it's 4 or less, you let it rest, which means keep it the same. Let it rest, keep it the same. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. So let's look at number 17. 0.38, we want to round that to the nearest tenth. So when this says round to the nearest tenth, the first thing I'm going to do is underline the digit that's in the tenths place. In this case, it's 3. We always look next door to the right. That number is going to tell us what to do. The 8 is 5 or more, so we're going to raise the score. So this is kind of like, and kind of zoom out a little bit because sometimes we get caught up in the little parts that we're not looking at the whole picture. This is like if you have 38 pennies, and we're basically saying, is that closer to 40 or is that closer to 30? The answer is it's closer to 40. But since we don't need that 0 at the end, we want it to round to the nearest tenth. This will round to 0.4. And your answer should always end in the place that it told you to, 4 tenths. So I rounded it to the nearest tenth. On number 18, we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So I'm going to underline the 7, which is in the hundredths place. And remember, we look next door to the right. The 4 is 4 or less, so what does that mean? It means we let it rest. That means we leave the 7 alone. It's going to stay 7. All the numbers to the right are going to stay the same, and everything to the left turns to zeros. So all I really need now is 0.17. I ended it in the hundredths place, 17 hundredths. Okay, on the next one, we're going to round to the nearest thousandth. So I'm going to underline the 8. It's in the thousandths place. I look next door to the 2. It's 4 or less, so that tells me to let it rest. Everything else is going to stay the same that's on the left, so 1.46 7/8. The 2 actually changes to a 0, but we just don't need it. It's like simplest form. So this rounds to 1 and 478 thousandths. The next one we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So I'm going to underline the 3. I'm going to look at the 5. The 5 is 5 or more, so I'm going to raise the score. So that means a 3 is going to go up to a 4. So the 5.6 stays. The 3 changes to a 4. The numbers after it will be zeros, but we don't need them. 5 and 64 hundredths. Okay, last one says round to the nearest whole number. The whole number is the 1 spot, okay? So if I look at the 1 spot, it's like your dollars. And then I look at the 7. The 7 is 5 or more, so that tells me to raise the score to go up. So think about if this was like $18.75. What we're really saying is this is almost $19. It's closer to 19 than to 18. So since it says whole number, I could put 19.0000, but again, we just don't need it. All we need is 19 for our whole number. Okay? All right, the last few things we're going to do are some operations with decimals. So we're going to add and subtract, and then we're going to multiply and divide. So on 22, now I know in the real world, and even I do too, we're going to use our phones and use our calculators, okay? But when you're in an elementary classroom teaching math, they're not going to be allowed to use calculators. They have to know how to do these operations by hand. Therefore, you need to learn them by hand. So we're going to do these by hand. Of course, you can check it with a calculator, but on this and on your homework, I'm going to be looking for your work to be shown, not just your answer. So make sure you're writing it out to get full credit. So for adding and subtracting decimals, what we have to make sure we do is line up the decimals. And the reason we do that is because if we line up the decimals, then all of our place values will be lined up. So 7.02 plus 3.5, and again, what we can do in the empty spots is put a 0 so that everybody has a buddy, if you will. So I have my hundredths together, my tenths, and my ones. And then we're just adding here, so let's go down. 2 plus 0 is 2. 0 plus 5 is 5. Bring down your decimal. 7 plus 3 is 10. So that answer is 10 and 52 hundredths. Same thing on 23, except now we have 3 numbers. We just got to make sure we stack them and line up the decimals. So I'm going to come up here for some more room. 5.03, 16.988, 0.006. And this again, when I'm teaching, I really stress to people, of course, the importance of being neat, because if you're not neat, and even I went a little crooked there, but if they're using lined paper, it's even easier to keep all of your places together so you don't add or subtract wrong digits together. Okay, so let's go down the thousandths. 8 plus 6 is 14. Put the 4, carry the 1. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Put the 2, carry the 1. 9 plus 1 is 10. So I'm going to put a 0 and carry the 1. Now make sure you bring down your decimal right here so you don't forget it. 5 plus 6 is 11, plus 1 more is 12. Put the 2, carry the 1, and then 1 plus 1 is 2. So 22 and 24 thousandths for that answer. Okay, let's do some subtraction ones. So just make sure you're paying attention to the sign, but the skill is the same. We have to line, let me write that again. 187.5 minus 8.39. I like to always put zeros in the empty spots. I just like everything to be lined up and have a buddy. That's optional for you. 0 plus 9 is 9. 5 plus 3 is 8. Decimal. Oh, I'm adding. See, here we go. I need to start over. I got in adding mode. Let me rewrite that. 187.5 minus 8.39. Okay, here we go. Let's start this over. Okay, we cannot do 0 minus 9, so I need to borrow from the 5, make that a 4. This becomes 10. 10 minus 9 is 1. 4 minus 3 is 1. Bring down your decimal. 7 minus 8, I cannot do. Borrow from the 8, make that 7. So this is 17 minus 8, which is 9. 7 minus 0 is 7. 1 minus 0 is 1. And then I get 179 and 11 hundredths. Okay, let's go to the last page. One more subtraction. We have 4.2 minus 2.006. So again, make sure we line up our decimals. I'm going to put zeros here. Okay, I cannot do 0 minus 6. I cannot do 0. I cannot borrow from a 0. And a quick way to do this is I just look at this like a number 20. So if I borrow 1 from 20, I'm going to go up here. I have 19 left, and this is 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. 9 minus 0 is 9. 1 minus 0 is 1. 4 minus 2 is 2. 2.194. All right, last one for adding and subtracting. This one we have both of them in one. Allison went shopping and spent $29.65 at Walmart and $98.43 at Target. If she had $150 in cash to spend, how much money did she have left over after visiting Walmart and Target? So this is a two-step problem. The first thing we need to do is add the totals together, and then we're going to subtract those from 150. So again, I know we have calculators in the real world, but we're going to pretend like we're helping students do this by hand. Okay, 5 plus 3 is 8, 6 plus 4 is 10, 10 plus 8 is 18, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so this amount right here is how much she spent, $128.08. So now to find out how much she has left over, what are we going to do with that amount? We're going to subtract it from 150. So let's do $150 minus 128.08. Okay, and here we are again. I can't do 0 minus 8. I can't borrow from a 0. I can't borrow from a 0. So this is a trick I used to teach. It's a lot easier than borrowing and keep carrying over. Think of this as 1,500. If I took 1 away from 1,500, I would have 1,499 left. So 1, 4, 9, 9, and now this one is 10. 10 minus 8 is 2. 9 minus 0 is 9. Bring down the decimal. 9 minus 8 is 1. 4 minus 2 is 2. 1 minus 1 is 0. So the answer is she has $21.92 left over. So that was a multi-step problem, or two-step. We added the totals first, then subtracted it from how much she had. All right, now we're going to go on to multiplying decimals. And again, in real life, if we're multiplying something, we'd use our calculator. But we're going to learn how to do it by hand, or review how to do it by hand. If you need more room, you can go to another piece of paper. I'm going to try to put it in down here. Okay, so if we have 0.7 times 0.2, the first step in multiplying decimals is just multiply the numbers as usual, and the only thing special is at the end. So here we have 2 times 7, which is just 14. Now I could do the 2 times 0 and 0 here, but it's really not necessary. Then what we do is count the number of decimal places in our two numbers up here, our factors, and that's how many will be in our answer. So for example, this has 1 decimal place, this has 1 decimal place. So this has 2 places. So what we do at the number is we start at the back and count back 1, 2 places, and that's where our decimal will go. So the answer for 27 is 0.14. Now you could just put 0.14, but I just like to put that 0 there to make sure we really know there's not a whole number. Okay, let's do the last one. 0.856 times 3.1. Now just remember, for multiplying decimals, you don't need to line up the decimals because we only will move them at the end to determine where the decimal will go. So we're just going to multiply as usual. I'm going to do 1 times everything. 1 times 6 is 6. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 8 is 8. Don't really need to do the 1 times 0. It's not going to make a difference. Now I'm going to do 3 times everything, but before I do, I have to put a 0 here, right? Because now we're moving on to the tens place. 3 times 6, I'm sorry, in this case it's ones, but normally with whole numbers, that's tens. The point is we're going to the second number, and that's why we have to put this 0 here. 3 times 6 is 18. Put the 8, carry the 1. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16. Put the 6, carry the 1. 3 times 8 is 24, plus 1 is 25. And then we add these two numbers together. 6, 8 plus 5 is 13. That's 15, 6, 2. Okay, now that's not our answer. We have to go back and count our decimal places. So the first number had 3, and this one has 1. What's 3 plus 1? 4. So we start at the back of the number. 1, 2, 3, 4. So our decimal is going to be between the 2 and the 6. So for our final answer over here, we're going to write 2.6536. Okay, I'm going to separate this a little bit. All right, now let's go on to dividing decimals. So the first one is 2.55 divided by 5. So we're going to write it in here just like we would with a little division house. Again, we're learning how to do this by hand. So really, the first thing you need to do when you're dividing with decimals, and if your number out here is a whole number, you're going to bring your decimal straight up. And then you're just going to divide as usual. 5 will not fit into a 2, so we're going to put 0. 5 will go into 25 5 times. 5 times 5 is 25. And so when you get down here, just ignore the decimal and pretend like those are just whole numbers. 25 minus 25 is 0. Then we have to bring down the next digit, which is 5. 5 will fit into 5 one time. 1 times 5 is 5. 5 minus 5 is 0, and now we are done. So this is our answer right here, 51 hundredths. Okay, and the next one, we have 24.12 divided by 0.6. Now notice on this first one, we just had a 5 out here. Now we're doing a decimal divided by a decimal, so this is a little bit different. So basically what we want to do is we want to make this a whole number, but we can't just magically do that. But what we're going to do is move the decimal over one place. But if we move the decimal over one place in our divisor, we have to move it over one place in our dividend. That's the number on the inside. So I'm going to rewrite this problem now cleaned up. So this now is just 6. And this new number that we made is now 241.2. See how we've gotten rid of that decimal here, but we had to do it by moving it over here to keep it equivalent. So now I'm just going to float this decimal up. Then I'm going to divide as usual. 6 will not fit into a 2. 6 will fit into 24 4 times. 4 times 6 is 24. 24 minus 24 is 0. Now, keep in mind with dividing, you can only bring down one number at a time. So I'm going to bring down the 1. 6 will not fit into 1, so we put a 0 there. 0 times 6 is 0. 1 minus 0 is 1. And now I can bring down the 2. 6 will fit into 12 how many times? Twice. And 12 minus 12 is 0. Okay, so up here, all I really need for my answer is this right here, the 40.2. And of course, you can check yourself on the calculator, but on your homework, you're going to be expected to show me how to do it by hand. All right, the very last thing we have is talking about multiplying and dividing by powers of 10, and this is actually the easiest thing because when you're multiplying by multiples of 10, all you really have to do is move the decimal to the right or left, however many zeros are in here. So for example, 4.37 times 10. So if you're multiplying, think like you're getting bigger because you are. Multiplication is growing. So when you're multiplying, you move the decimal to the right. Since 10 has 1 0, we move it to the right one place. So this becomes 43.7. 17.693 times 1,000. 1,000 has 3 zeros, so we move the decimal 3 places to the right. So this one's actually just going to be 17,693. We don't need the decimal at the end because there's nothing after it, so we can just leave it like a whole number. Now when we're dividing by multiples of 10, we're going to do the opposite. Dividing, we're going to move the decimal to the left because the number is getting smaller. So if I divide by 100, that has 2 zeros. I move the decimal 1, 2 places. And what we're going to do in this empty spot is put a 0. So our final answer is 0.01047, like that. Last one, 87.56 divided by 1,000. So to divide, we move it to the left. This has 3 places, 1, 2, 3, so it lands right in front of that 8. So this equals 0.88756. Okay, so if you want to make a little note, multiply, move right, move the decimal to the right, divide, you move the decimal to the left. However many zeros you're dividing by or multiplying by, that's how many places you move. And that is it for our work with decimals.